Cressida is my only daughter. My mother's voice boomed over the gala. She pointed a manicured finger at me, her smile a jagged blade. Laken! She's a bastard! A mistake! As the room erupted in mocking laughter, the heavy doors crashed open. A man in black strode past the elite, ignoring the chaos. Laken Horton, he said, his voice a hammer strike. Step forward for the DNA results and the will. The room went dead silent. I closed my eyes, letting the memory of that chilling authority pull me back to the quiet week before the storm. Back to the one room where the air was still thick with the truth they were so desperate to kill. The strong, dusty scent of mahogany usually brought me peace. But tonight, the air in my father's study was stifling, as if the room itself were holding its breath. I stood beside the oak desk, the very desk where I used to sit on his lap as he explained the beauty of a well-proportioned ledger. To the outside world, I was the quietest shadow in a family that was always under scrutiny. To my mother and sister, I was merely an administrative tool, a ghost they only noticed when the housework became overwhelming. I pick up his favorite fountain pen, a heavy Mont Blanc that feels like a relic of a more honest era. I begin to clean the nib with meticulous care, a ritual of love for a man who believed that a person's word was their only true currency. In this house, money is a weapon, but my father taught me that true wealth isn't found in a bank vault. It lives in the quiet of a clear conscience. I don't mind the silence of being ignored. It gives me time to observe. It gives me time to see the cracks they think they've painted over. As I reached into the bottom drawer for his spare ink cartridge, my fingers brushed against something thin and sharp. It was a small, hand-folded piece of paper, its edges yellowed and brittle. I instantly recognized his clear, precise handwriting. This wasn't a sentimental letter. It was a warning. The cracks in the foundation are deeper than the basement. Look where the light doesn't reach. My heart pounded in my chest. My professional instincts as a financial analyst screamed within me. This wasn't just a note. It was a map. I was no longer a victim of this family's indifference. I was the protector of the only thing he had left. His honor. The heavy oak door creaks open, and the temperature in the room seems to plummet 10 degrees. The sharp, metallic tang of expensive French perfume cuts through the comforting smell of old paper. I don't have to look up to know my mother has arrived. Lysandra doesn't enter rooms. She occupies them, demanding the oxygen of everyone present. Laken, for heaven's sake, put down those dusty pens, Lysandra snaps, her voice like silk wrapped around a razor blade. She looks perfect, every platinum hair in place, her grieving widow act polished to a high shine. The gala is in 6 days, and I am drowning in paperwork. I need you to be useful for once. She drops a thick stack of documents onto the desk, covering the spot I had just cleaned. Her eyes are cold, assessing. These are the final medical authorizations and estate settlements. I've already had Cressida sign her portion. I need yours now so we can put this tragic chapter behind us. I look at her, really look at her, and I see the frantic edge behind her composure. She leans in, her voice dropping to that patronizing tone she uses when she wants to make me feel small. You've always struggled with the pressure of the Horton name, darling. Signing these will take the weight off your shoulders. It's for the family's protection. You wouldn't want to cause a scandal now, would you? It's a classic gaslighting maneuver, the kind she's used on me since I was a child. She wants me to believe that my surrender is actually my salvation. I look down at the papers. My eyes scan the legal jargon, the clauses hidden in the fine print. This isn't a medical settlement. It's a total surrender of my inheritance. Worse, it's a voluntary confession of non-biological status, carefully drafted to bypass Illinois probate laws. She isn't just asking for my signature. She's asking me to sign my own death warrant as a Horton. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who was supposed to protect you and realized they were actually the architect of your ruin? It's a moment that either breaks you or builds you into something unbreakable. I don't argue. I don't cry. A dramatic confrontation is what she expects, and I refuse to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I reach into my own pocket and pull out a sleek, matte black pen, one I developed during my time auditing high-security firms. It looks ordinary, but the ink is a specialized formula designed to vanish completely within 24 hours when exposed to light. I sign each page with a steady hand. My name, Laken Horton, looks bold and permanent on the white paper. I see Lysandra's shoulders relax, a flicker of triumphant disdain crossing her face. She thinks she's won. She thinks I'm the same compliant girl I've always been. But forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to destroy you. It means refusing to let their darkness dictate your light. There, I say quietly, handing the stack back to her. I hope this brings you the peace you're looking for, Mother. She snatches the papers, her smile thin and predatory. Good girl. Now do something about your hair before the caterers arrive. You look like you've been living in a basement. She turns on her heel and sweeps out of the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood like the ticking of a clock. The moment the door closes, I move with surgical precision. I open my encrypted laptop, my fingers flying across the keys. I wasn't just signing papers. I was granting myself a window. The digital trail of those documents is now active, and because I've linked them to a forensic audit of the Horton Group's offshore transfers, the second that ink starts to fade, every alarm in the federal system will trigger. I pull up a secure chat window and type a single phrase. The bait is taken. Prepare the storm. The reply from Soren is instant. Trail is live. The ink is running out, Laken. I walk to the window and look out at the Chicago skyline. The first flakes of a blizzard are beginning to swirl in the wind, white and cold. I look at the framed photograph of my father on the desk, his eyes kind and unwavering. I am not doing this to hurt her, Dad. I whisper to the empty room. I am doing this so the truth can finally breathe. I've lived my whole life like a shadow, but shadows only exist when there's light. Tonight, I don't need their light to be seen. I watch my mother walk away with a smile that has cost her everything, unaware that the ink on those pages is as fleeting as her loyalty. The morning light on Michigan Avenue usually sparkles, but today it feels sharp, like 1,000 tiny needles against my skin. I find myself standing inside a private fitting room at Laurent's, the air thick with the scent of gardenia and excessive wealth. My mother, Lysandra, and my sister Cressida occupy the velvet sofa outside my curtain, their voices a melodic hum of shared secrets and sharp edges. In this mirrored cage, the contrast is agonizingly clear. Cressida is being draped in hand-stitched silk and a diamond necklace that costs more than my college tuition. She is the gold of the Horton family, radiant and celebrated. I am the shadow, a necessary backdrop to make her shine brighter. Cressida turns before the three-way mirror, watching her own reflection with a hunger that borders on devotion. Laken, be a dear and hold the train, Lysandra says, not even looking at me. Her tone is that of a master to a servant, a casual dismissal of my presence as a daughter. I step forward and lift the heavy fabric, my fingers brushing the cool silk. They begin a coordinated dance of gaslighting, a tactic they've perfected over decades. Lysandra sighs, her eyes catching mine in the mirror. It's a pity, Laken. If you had just a fraction of your sister's grace, perhaps you wouldn't look so utilitarian in everything you wear. It's an embarrassment to your father's memory when you show up looking like a clerk. I don't answer. I've learned that silence is my only fortress. I observe Cressida's vanity not with a spark of jealousy, but with a hollow sense of pity. A bird raised in a gilded cage thinks flying is an illness, and she is so deeply entrenched in this artificial sky that she doesn't realize her wings have been clipped by our mother's expectations. She is a prisoner of the image, a doll being dressed for a play she didn't write. Despite the stings of their words, I notice a loose thread snagging the lace near her waist. Without a word, I reach out and carefully tuck it back, smoothing the fabric so it doesn't tear. I choose to remain soft where they have turned to stone. Cruelty is a choice, and I refuse to let it be my teacher. The air in the boutique suddenly shifts. It's time for the final checkouts before the gala. I see a simple, structured navy dress on a mannequin near the door. Something professional, something that would have made my father proud. I decide to purchase it, a small act of self-assertion. I hand my card to the sales associate, a woman whose smile is as stiff as her collar. The machine beeps once, twice. A flat, discordant tone follows. "I'm sorry, Miss Horton, the transaction was declined," she says, her voice carrying across the quiet room. Lysandra doesn't look surprised. She stands up, smoothing her skirt with a slow, deliberate motion. "Oh, I forgot to mention, Laken. I've had to make some difficult decisions regarding the family trusts. Given your recent fiscal irresponsibility and your refusal to cooperate with the estate settlement, I've revoked your access to all joint accounts and credit lines." My heart hammers against my ribs, but my face remains a mask of ice. This is a clinical execution of a plan. Under Illinois law, as the primary executor and holder of the power of attorney, she has the legal leverage to freeze my assets if she can prove financial instability. She has spent weeks preparing this trap to leave me destitute and powerless. Cressida giggles, a sound like breaking glass. "Maybe you can find something at a thrift store, Laken. It would certainly fit your aesthetic." I don't give them the satisfaction of a public scene. I don't let a single tear escape. I simply take my card back and place the dress back on the rack. My mind is already moving past the shock, calculating the digital response I've already set in motion. I remember my father's whispered advice during our long walks in Lincoln Park. The most dangerous person in the room is the one who has nothing left to lose but her integrity. This lockout isn't a cage, it's a key. It severs the final tether of my dependency on their poisoned well. "We're leaving," Lysandra announces, checking her watch. "The limousine is waiting, and we have the floral arrangements to approve. You can find your own way back, Laken. Perhaps the walk will help you reconsider your attitude." They sweep out of the boutique, a whirlwind of perfume and arrogance, leaving me standing alone under the harsh fluorescent lights. Through the glass storefront, I see the black limousine pull away into the swirling gray of the Chicago streets. A blizzard is beginning to howl, the wind whipping the first flakes of snow against the pavement. I am miles from home, with no money and no transportation. I step out onto Michigan Avenue, the cold hitting me like a physical blow. The wind is fierce, whistling between the skyscrapers, but I find myself breathing easier than I have in years. I pull an encrypted burner phone from my pocket, a device Lysandra doesn't know exists. I dial a number and wait for the click. "Soren? It's Laken. The lockout is complete. She thinks I'm stranded." There's a pause, then his steady voice. "The digital ink is settling into the probate system. Your private crypto wallet is active. You're no longer on their grid." I start the long walk south, my boots crunching on the fresh ice. The snow is blinding, turning the city into a white void, but my direction is clear. Halfway home, the cold begins to seep into my bones. I see the glowing stained glass of a small, quiet church tucked between two office buildings. I duck inside to catch my breath, the scent of old wax and damp wool offering a temporary sanctuary. I reach into my coat pocket and find a handful of loose change, the only physical money I have left. I walk over to the donation box for the homeless and drop it in, the clink of the coins echoing in the silent nave. I am losing a fortune, but I still have my humanity. I stand there for a moment, looking up at the altar. I don't feel like a victim. I feel free. The artificial warmth of their world has been replaced by the freezing truth of the storm. And for the first time, I am grateful for the cold. I step back out into the blizzard, my silhouette a tiny, determined dot against the vast white expanse of the city. My eyes aren't watering from the wind. They are burning with a calm, intellectual fire. While they own the limousine and the diamonds, I finally own my soul. The walk home will be long, but every step takes me further away from their shadow and closer to the light I am building myself. The blizzard screams against the stone walls of the Art Institute of Chicago, a wild, untamed beast clawing at the sanctuary of the elite. Inside, the air is stagnant, heavy with the scent of expensive lilies and the suffocating perfume of people who believe money can buy a clean soul. I didn't arrive in a limousine. There was no valet to whisk away my keys or a red carpet to soften my step. I walked through the service entrance, my boots clicking against the industrial tile of the basement before I emerged into the marble splendor of the grand ballroom. I am wearing a minimalist black dress, a sharp contrast to the sea of sequins and silk. It isn't an outfit of poverty, it is a silent protest. It is the armor of someone who has nothing left to hide. I weaved through the crowd, like a ghost moving among a graveyard of living statues. These were faces I'd seen at every charity auction and board meeting since childhood. They looked at me, but they didn't see me. I was the other in the Horton family, the one who stayed in the lab, the one who didn't fit the established image. A house built on lies doesn't need a storm to fall. It just needs the truth told. I felt the weight of my father's notes in my hands, a tangible reminder that I wasn't here as a guest. I was here as a witness to the end of an era. In the corner of the room, near a towering Grecian urn, I see Mrs. Gable, my retired third-grade teacher. She looks frail in her vintage velvet, ignored by the young socialites circling for champagne. I step toward her, the only person in this room who ever looked at me and saw a person instead of a liability. "Laken? Is that you, dear?" she whispers, her eyes bright with sudden recognition. I help her find a seat away from the draft of the vents, adjusting her wrap with a gentleness I haven't felt in days. My spirit remains uncorrupted by the greed in this room, because I choose to see the people they've decided are invisible. "Thank you, child," she murmurs. "You always were the heart of that family, even if they were too blind to see it." The lights dim, and the golden spotlights focus on the main stage. Lysandra and Cressida stand there, draped in diamonds that sparkle like ice under a midday sun. The visual contrast is a physical blow. They are center stage, the suns around which this entire social galaxy rotates. I stand in the deep shadows of a marble pillar, a silent observer of my own family's vanity. My knuckles are white against my bag. I am not a part of their light anymore, but I am the one holding the fuse to the darkness that is about to swallow them. Lysandra steps to the microphone, a glass of vintage champagne held high. Her smile is radiant, practiced, and utterly hollow. "Welcome, friends, to a night of legacy," she begins, her voice honeyed and smooth. She speaks of the Horton Group, of heritage, and of the future. Then her tone shifts. It becomes sharper, more focused. "Tonight, I am proud to formally introduce my one and only daughter, Cressida, as the sole heir and future of our family's name." A confused hush ripples through the 500 guests. Heads turn, eyes searching the shadows for the youngest daughter who has lived in the margins for 24 years. Then, Lysandra's gaze finds me. She points a manicured finger toward the pillar where I stand. "Some of you may wonder about Laken," she says, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "But legacy requires purity. Laken is a bastard, a product of a shameful affair my late husband was too weak to fix. She is a mistake we have carried for too long." The laughter starts low, a cruel, buzzing sound that fills the room. Socialites hide their smirks behind silk fans. The camera flashes are like strobe lights, blinding and intrusive. I feel a sensory overload, the heat, the noise, the collective weight of their judgment. But I stand perfectly still, a pillar of stoic strength. Your worth is not a vote held by a crowd of strangers. It is the quiet knowledge of who you are when no one is watching. I don't beg for their approval. I don't run for the exit. I look directly at Lysandra, my expression unreadable. I have spent my life being the mistake, but tonight, the mistake is about to become the reckoning. I can see the triumph in Cressida's eyes, a glint of malicious joy that she has finally erased me from the Horton family tree. She doesn't realize that when you cut someone out of a rotten tree, you're actually saving them from the fall. Cressida steps forward, her voice amplified by the silence that follows the shock. "It's not just about blood, Mother," she says, her tone dripping with feigned disappointment. "It's about character. I was hoping Laken would leave with some dignity, but this afternoon she stole the heirloom diamond necklace from Mother's safe, the one our grandmother wore." The room gasps. This is the poison blade, a calculated move to trigger a probable cause arrest. Under Illinois law, the value of that necklace makes it a Class 1 felony. They aren't just trying to disown me, they are trying to put me in a cage before I can utter a single word of the truth. Security guards in dark suits begin to close in, their movements efficient and cold. The socialites pull back, as if my presence is a contagion. I don't resist. I don't beg for mercy from people who have forgotten the meaning of the word. Instead, I adjust my posture, standing taller than I ever have in this building. I look at Cressida, not with the hatred she expects, but with a look of profound, soul-deep sorrow. I pity you, Cressida, I say softly, the words carrying through the sudden stillness of the front rows. You have the name, the jewelry, and the stage. Yet you are the one who feels she has to steal the truth just to feel safe. Cressida's face contorts, her composure cracking for a split second. She signals the guards to move faster, her eyes darting toward the exits. She is terrified of what I might say next. She thinks she can silence me with a pair of handcuffs. But the law she is trying to weaponize is the same law that is about to dismantle her world. I feel the cold air from the vents on my skin, the only honest thing in this room. I am ready. I have been ready since the moment I cleaned my father's pens. The guards are 3 steps away when a heavy, rhythmic thud echoes through the ballroom. It isn't the sound of a falling glass or a shuddering camera. It is the sound of the main oak doors hitting the marble walls with the force of an avalanche. A blast of freezing Chicago wind sweeps through the hall, extinguishing the candles on the nearby tables and sending a shiver through the crowd of silk-clad guests. The laughter dies in 1,000 throats. Every head turns. Every camera pivots. A tall silhouette in a black suit steps into the light. He moves with an authority that makes the security guards freeze in their tracks. He doesn't look at the stage. He doesn't acknowledge Lysandra's gasps or Cressida's widening eyes. He ignores the elite of Chicago as if they were nothing more than dust on the floor. His gaze is fixed on me. For the first time tonight, the eyes of the elite move away from my shame and toward a new, darker authority. The man in black has arrived, and he isn't here to join the party. The rhythmic echo of heavy boots against marble is the only sound that survives the sudden, icy draft. Corvus moves through the ballroom with the terrifying precision of a predator in a room full of glass ornaments. He doesn't look left or right. He doesn't flinch when Lysandra shrieks for the security team to throw him out. He simply moves through the Chicago elite like a hot knife through butter, his black suit absorbing the golden glare of the chandeliers. I stand my ground, my heart a drum against my ribs, but my exterior is as calm as the frozen lake outside. In a room full of people who only see what they want, one man has arrived to show them what they fear. The truth. He stops exactly 3 paces in front of me. The height difference is imposing, yet his presence feels like a shield rather than a threat. Without a word, he reaches into his breast pocket and offers me a simple, clean white handkerchief. It is an act of old-world chivalry. A silent signal to every vulture in this room that he recognizes me as the true lady of the house. I take it, the linen cool against my trembling fingers, and offer a small nod of gratitude. My stoic mask, hardened by years of Lysandra's psychological warfare, finally softens with a flicker of recognition. I am not standing alone in the dark anymore. Lysandra lunges forward, her face a mask of aristocratic fury. Who do you think you are? This is a private event. Guards, remove this man. The security detail hesitates, caught between their employer and the sheer gravity of Corvus's stare. Corvus doesn't even grant her a glance. Instead, he reaches into his leather briefcase and produces a document bearing the gold-embossed seal of the federal court. Mrs. Horton, he says, his voice a low, resonant baritone that vibrates in the high ceiling. I am the court-appointed executor of Arthur Horton's private mandates. This is a federal court order. If your men touch me, they will be interfering with a federal probate investigation. The security team freezes, effectively paralyzed by a legal authority that transcends Lysandra's checkbook. Corvus turns to a small, sleek device on the mahogany table nearby. He activates a high-resolution portable projector. For a heartbeat, the ballroom remains dark, and then, a 3D hologram of my father flickers into life in the center of the hall. Arthur Horton looks vibrant, healthy, and resolute. The man I remember before the illness took his voice. A collective gasp ripples through the crowd. Lysandra stumbles back, her hand flying to her throat as if she's seen a ghost. Because she has. The digital image of my father speaks, his voice booming through the speakers with a clarity that makes the crystal glasses on the tables hum. If you are seeing this, it means my wife has finally played her hand and tried to erase my youngest daughter from history, the hologram says, his eyes seemingly scanning the room. Laken, if you are listening, I am sorry I had to leave you in the den of lions, but I never left you unarmed. My breath hitches. I listen to his voice not with a desire for the coins or the property, but with a deep, aching love that transcends the grave. I whispered to the air, I never cared about the wealth, Dad. I only wanted to hear you say you still knew me. The hologram begins to outline the specifics of a dead man's switch trust, a sophisticated legal structure where assets are automatically transferred if specific moral or public conditions are met, like the public disowning of a blood heir. The room, which had been loud with cruel mockery only minutes ago, is now so silent that the falling snow against the high windows sounds like a rhythmic drumming of thunder. The elite guests, those who laughed the loudest at the bastard comment, now avoid eye contact with Lysandra. The moral tide hasn't just turned. It has become a tsunami. Arthur's digital ghost continues, revealing that Laken was the only person he trusted to manage the family's true integrity fund, an off-book reserve meant for charitable research. He confirms, in front of everyone who matters in Chicago, that I am the sole guardian of the family's honor. I think of the lessons he taught me while we sat in this very museum years ago. A legacy isn't what you leave for people, it's what you leave in them. I see his legacy now, not in the marble halls or the trust funds, but in the iron-willed resilience that allowed me to stand tall while the world tried to break me. The hologram flickers and begins to fade, the light dimming as the message ends. The digital ghost of my father disappears into the air, leaving behind a silence so cold it makes the Chicago blizzard outside feel like a summer breeze. Corvus doesn't waste a second. He reaches into his black leather case one last time and pulls out a sealed, red-waxed envelope. It is the forensic DNA report, the absolute proof that will either bridge the gap or burn the bridge. Lysandra is trembling now, her composure shattered like dropped porcelain. The Queen of Chicago looks small, her expensive gown suddenly appearing like a costume that no longer fits. Corvus locks his eyes onto hers, the red wax of the envelope glowing like a drop of blood under the spotlights. The silence of the guilty is the loudest sound in the world. I don't feel the need to say a word. The dead have spoken, and the living are finally being forced to listen. Corvus doesn't hesitate. With a surgical flick of his thumb, he breaks the seal. The sound of tearing paper is tiny, yet in the absolute silence of the Art Institute, it echoes like a gunshot. He clears his throat, his voice assuming the dispassionate, terrifying weight of a federal judge. He begins to read the results of the forensic DNA test, certified by the highest labs in the country. Laken Horton, a 99.9% biological match to Arthur Horton. Cressida Horton, 0%. The air in the room leaves in a collective, ragged gasp. The bastard label that Lysandra had tried to brand me with only minutes ago doesn't just fall away. It physically migrates. It crosses the stage and settles on Cressida, who stands frozen in her designer silk, her face draining of color until she looks like one of the marble statues surrounding us. The report goes further, detailing the timeline of Lysandra's affair with a rival real estate mogul 27 years ago, the very man my father spent his life fighting. Cressida isn't just an outsider. She is the living embodiment of the betrayal that likely broke my father's heart, long before the illness took his body. I find myself looking at my mother, but I don't feel the surge of triumph I expected. Instead, a wave of profound, weary sadness washes over me. I see her for exactly what she is, a woman who built a kingdom on a foundation of quicksand. I spent my entire life trying to earn a love that was built on a lie you told yourself, I say, my voice steady and carrying to the furthest corners of the hall. I don't hate you for the lie, Mother. I pity you. I pity the 24 years you spent in terror, wondering if today would be the day the world finally saw who you really are. It's a moment of clarity that changes the temperature of my soul. I realize that a crown of thorns doesn't become a crown of gold just because you call it a legacy. My father's real inheritance wasn't the buildings or the bank accounts. It was the truth he left in my hands. Lysandra's eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, are now wide and wild. She looks like a trapped animal, realizing the cage she built for me has suddenly shrunk around her own neck. The shock in the room lasts only seconds before Lysandra's survival instinct kicks in, a desperate, venomous pivot. "This is a deep fake!" she screams, her voice cracking as she points a trembling hand at Corvus. "It's a forgery! Laken used the money she stole from my safe to buy a crooked lawyer and a fake report. She's trying to stage a coup because she knows she's been cut out." She turns to the museum security, her influence still screaming even as her logic fails. "What are you waiting for? Seize them! They are trespassing! They are thieves!" She fumbles for her phone, her fingers shaking as she dials a high-ranking contact in the local precinct. She is trying to weaponize the very judicial system she has spent years manipulating. It's a frantic attempt to suppress the evidence before the morning headlines can solidify her ruin. I watch the security guards hesitate, then begin to move forward, their faces grim. When a lie is big enough, the person telling it will burn the whole world down just to keep it warm. I don't move. I don't flinch. I stand there with the stoic grace of someone who has already seen the end of the movie. "Laken Horton, you are under citizen's arrest for grand larceny and criminal defamation," Lysandra snarls, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She thinks she can still win this with volume and violence, but she's forgotten the most important rule of the game we play. I am a data analyst. I don't just find the truth, I secure it. As the lead guard reaches for my arm, I slowly pull out my own phone. I don't call the police. I don't call a lawyer. I simply hold the screen up so the front row guests can see the ticking clock of a live streaming server. "The authorization you forced me to sign 6 days ago, Mother? The one you thought surrendered my rights?" My voice is calm, a stark contrast to her screeching. "It was a legal trap. My father and I designed it years ago. The moment I signed those papers, it triggered an automatic forensic audit of the Horton Group's secret Swiss accounts. Every dollar you moved, every bribe you paid to keep Cressida's origins a secret, it's all being uploaded to a federal server as we speak. This entire evening, including your confession of my bastard status, has been broadcast live to a secure legal cloud." Corvus leans in, his voice a low whisper that only I can hear. "The sirens are 3 blocks away, Laken, but they aren't coming for the intruders." I look up at the high, vaulted ceiling of the Art Institute, thinking of my father's quiet kindness. He always said that sunlight is the best disinfectant for a rotting heart. I can almost feel him standing beside me, his hand on my shoulder, telling me that the weight I've been carrying wasn't mine to begin with. The sound of sirens finally cuts through the Chicago wind, growing louder, more insistent. The red and blue lights begin to dance against the high glass walls, reflecting off the marble and the diamonds, turning the ballroom into a chaotic kaleidoscope of justice. Lysandra realizes the game is over. The mask of the grieving widow and the corporate queen finally falls, revealing the hollow, terrified woman beneath. Her rage turns into a silent, trembling horror. My mother's world was a house of cards, and as the lights began to dance, I realized I wasn't the one who had set it on fire. She had struck the match decades ago. I just finally opened the window to let the smoke out. The smoke doesn't just clear. It reveals the scorched earth beneath our feet. Lysandra is still shrieking into the void, her voice a jagged glass edge that no longer cuts. She demands her legal counsel, her board of directors, and the dignity she believes she still owns. But the ballroom is no longer hers, and the law has finally arrived to take inventory of her lies. I hold up my smartphone, the screen reflecting the frantic pulse of the red and blue lights dancing on the ceiling. The livestock ticker for the Horton Group is hemorrhaging in real time. It isn't just a market dip, it is a total collapse of confidence. I stand before her, my feet planted firmly on the cold marble floor. I haven't been waiting for revenge. I've been waiting for the numbers to catch up with the sins. I explained to the room, my voice calm and projecting, that the signature I gave her in my father's study was a forensic tripwire. The ink I used was designed to vanish, but the metadata of that digital transaction was permanent. It triggered a preset liquidation clause hidden deep within my father's private trust. By trying to steal my inheritance, she inadvertently unlocked a legal vault that froze every Horton asset globally. The silence that follows is heavier than any scream Lysandra could produce. I see the realization dawn on her face, the slow-motion horror of a woman who has lost her throne. Under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Marshal's office, every account she touched is now a crime scene. The limousine outside, the estate in the Gold Coast, even the diamonds hanging from her ears are no longer hers. They are evidence in a massive wire fraud and embezzlement investigation. Wealth is not a shield against the truth. It is often the very thing that makes the truth so visible. Looking at the guests, I see the socialites pulling back as if the family name is suddenly radioactive. The law is like a mirror. If you don't like what you see, breaking it doesn't change the reality. I didn't have to fight her with my hands. I fought her with the very integrity she thought was my greatest weakness. For a woman like Lysandra, being poor is a tragedy, but being irrelevant is a death sentence. And in this moment, she is both. Cressida, watching the empire dissolve into digital dust, finally reaches her breaking point. The silk and diamonds she wore so proudly now seem to weigh her down like lead. She begins to sob, a harsh, ugly sound that cuts through the whispers of the crowd. "Mother made me do it!" she wails, her finger pointing accusingly at the woman who groomed her for this role. She said he was going to change the will. She said we had to make it happen faster. The word poison hangs in the air, thick and suffocating, as she confesses to accelerating our father's end. I don't feel the surge of hatred I thought I would. I only feel a hollow, aching pity for the girl who was my sister in name only. I reach into my clutch and pull out a small digital recorder, playing the audio Soren retrieved from the house's smart security system. The recording is clear, Lysandra and Cressida discussing the dosage of toxins, their voices cold and transactional. It is the sound of two people bartering a soul for a bank account. The elite of Chicago watch in disgusted silence as the recording plays. I look at Cressida, my eyes searching hers for a single shred of the girl I used to play with in the garden. "You didn't kill him for the money, Cressida," I say, my voice a soft, tragic whisper. "You killed him because he was the only one who saw through your mask." She couldn't live with the fact that he loved the daughter I was, while merely tolerating the puppet she had become. Blood makes you related, but loyalty and love make you family. She was never my sister. She was just a stranger living in my father's house, waiting for him to die. The police officers move forward now, their boots heavy and purposeful on the polished floor. The crowd parts like the Red Sea, no one offering a word of comfort or a hand of support. Lysandra stands alone, a fallen queen in a ruined palace, her legacy turning to ash before her eyes. The cameras that once adored her now capture her shame with a cold, digital hunger. I stand my ground as the lead officer approaches her with a pair of steel handcuffs. In a final, desperate act of defiance, Lysandra lunges at me, her manicured hand raised to strike. I don't flinch. I don't move back. I catch her wrist with a calm, unshakable strength that surprises even me. I look her in the eyes, seeing the ghost of the mother I once tried so hard to love. "I am not taking your life, Mother," I say, my voice devoid of anger. "I am simply giving you back the one you earned." She sags in my grip, the last of her fire dying out. The truth does not need to be defended. It only needs to be revealed. I release her arm and step back, watching as the officers lead them both away toward the waiting patrol cars. The flashing lights turn the ballroom into a kaleidoscope of red and blue, a chaotic symphony of justice. I stand in the center of the room, my silhouette long and steady against the marble pillars. To the outside world, this looks like the end of the Hortons. To me, it feels like the first day I can finally use my own name. I wonder how many of you watching have felt the weight of a family secret that wasn't yours to carry. It is a heavy burden to be the only one holding the light in a house full of shadows. But the light always wins, even if it has to burn the house down to do it. Have you ever had to stand your ground against someone you loved to do what was right? I would love to hear how you found your strength in the comments below. We all have a story of finding our voice in the silence. I stand alone now as the last of the guests begin to filter out into the Chicago night. The heavy marble pillars of the Art Institute look like the bars of a cage for those being led away. I am the only Horton left in this room, yet I have never felt less alone. My father's presence is everywhere, in the quiet of the hall and the clarity of my conscience. I stood in the wreckage of the life they had stolen, watching as the handcuffs clicked shut. Not as an act of revenge, but as the final period on a sentence of lies. The Chicago Federal Building smells of industrial floor wax and old, cold bureaucracy. It is a sterile, gray contrast to the gold leaf decadence of the Horton estate. I sit behind a thick pane of reinforced glass, waiting for the woman who once occupied the center of my universe. When the heavy steel door opens, Lysandra is led in by a female officer. The designer silk and the diamond-encrusted watches are gone. In their place is a coarse, shapeless gray prison uniform that makes her look small, and for the first time in my life, human. She sits down, her hands trembling as she reaches for the intercom phone. Her platinum hair is dull, and the sharp lines of her face have collapsed into a mask of exhaustion. "Laken," she whispers, her voice a hollow rasp. "You have to help me. You're the CEO now. You can talk to the prosecutors. Tell them the evidence was tampered with. Tell them I was under duress." It is one last manipulation, a desperate attempt to use the authority she fought so hard to keep me from having. I remain stoic, my hands resting calmly on the table. Forgiveness is not about giving people back their power. It is about taking your peace back from their hands. I look into her eyes and see only the fear of a trapped animal. I don't feel the surge of anger I expected. I only feel a quiet, heavy closure. I slide a folder against the glass, containing the final legal summaries of the federal charges. Wire fraud, conspiracy, the ongoing investigation into the toxicological reports regarding my father's death. I explain the reality of the situation with surgical clarity. The legal system I used was built on the very transparency she spent her life trying to bury. The truth has a weight of its own, Mother. I can't move it, and I won't hide it. Lysandra bangs her fist against the glass, a flash of the old fire in her eyes. After everything I did to secure this family's name, you're destroying it. I shake my head slowly. She still doesn't understand that the name was already destroyed the moment she traded her conscience for a bank account. I speak without malice, my voice steady. I don't hate you for what you did, but I refuse to be the person who lets you do it again. This is the last time we will speak like this. I stand up, hanging up the phone before she can plead again. I leave the room without looking back. It is a final, necessary act of healthy separation. 1 week later, I stand in my father's study. The Chicago blizzard has finally broken, leaving behind a city buried in a clean, white shroud of snow. Corvus sits across from me, his black suit looking less like a shroud and more like a suit of armor now. He spreads the final transfer documents across the mahogany desk. Billions of dollars. The entire Horton empire is at the tip of my pen. To the world, I am the winner of a high-stakes war. To myself, I am just a daughter finally clearing the air. "You're sure about this, Laken?" Corvus asks, his gaze piercing and respectful. This is a level of wealth most people would kill to keep. I pick up my father's fountain pen, the one I cleaned so carefully before the storm. I don't hesitate. I sign the documents to execute a massive, irrevocable charitable donation. This isn't about being a martyr, it's about being a Horton. I am establishing the Horton Transparent Medical Research Foundation. Every dollar stolen from research grants will be returned, and every future cent will be tracked in real time. I keep only the modest inheritance my father set aside for my personal independence. A small house, a modest trust, and the freedom to pursue my own work. I was never driven by the greed that consumed Lysandra. I was driven by the desire to restore the honor of the man who raised me. I think of a truth often spoken by the great architects of our country. The only way to predict the future is to have the courage to create it. By giving the money away, I haven't lost power. I have finally become the most powerful version of myself. As a final act of restoration, I arrange for a small, anonymous trust to be established for the victims of my mother's financial schemes. I think of the families who lost their savings, the researchers whose work was stalled, and the patients who waited for breakthroughs that never came. Making right what was made wrong isn't just a legal duty, it is a human one. My father always told me that a man's true legacy isn't the buildings he leaves behind, but the lives he makes better. I can finally see his legacy breathing through the ink on these pages. I walk out onto the balcony of my new, modest apartment. The sun is just beginning to rise over Lake Michigan, painting the horizon in shades of fire and gold. The snow on the railing is starting to melt, dripping away like the lies that used to define my life. Corvus joins me, carrying 2 cups of steaming coffee. He doesn't say anything, and he doesn't have to. Our bond isn't built on romance or corporate alliance. It is built on a shared respect for a world where integrity matters. He is the guardian who saw the truth in me when I was still hiding in the shadows. I look out at the Chicago skyline, the towering buildings looking less like fortresses and more like possibilities. I am no longer the shadow in their castle. I am the architect of my own light. I feel the weight of the bastard label and the years of being erased finally lifting from my shoulders, replaced by the quiet, steady warmth of self-worth. The girl who used to apologize for taking up space is gone. In her place is a woman who knows exactly where she stands. I stood on that balcony and breathed in the cold, honest air of a world where I finally belonged to myself. The greatest inheritance wasn't the money, the property, or the prestige. It was the truth. It was the ability to look in the mirror and know that the person looking back is exactly who she was meant to be. The Horton name doesn't belong to the headlines or the prison cells anymore. It belongs to the light.